And happy Saturday morning, and welcome to this edition of the second season of Fantasy Football Come True. I'm your host, Hot Rod Funderburg. You can catch Fantasy Football Come True every week right here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. This is the show, as you already know, that wants to put a little green in your jeans. I'm joined by two stars of the show. These are the two best guys in the business. We have Mr. B. Foster and Mr. Ron Fun in the house. B. Foster, you still down there in Panther Country. How you doing? We know you were out on assignment last week. How's everything going?
All is well, man. Yeah, down here in Carolina Panther Country, good old Charlotte, North Carolina. They excited down here, man. We got boys 3-0. So I can't be mad. A lot of people want to talk about the schedule, but hey, they didn't make the schedule. The boys 3-0. They got to be excited about it, man. So I'm happy for them.
They definitely 3-0. I love the Carolina Panthers, but I really hope that they wind up 3-1 when this weekend is done with. Just because I'm a little biased. You see, I got the Cowboy jersey on, so of course I'm there. And of course, Ron Fun is partner in crime down there in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ron Fun, how you doing in the big capital city?
Hey, how's it going, man? How you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm excellent, man. Happy I got my boy B. Foster back in the saddle this week. It was a little rough without him last week, but we got through it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, we definitely got through, but B. Foster was out on assignment. He had to cover some of them sports teams and do his thing. So, that's just how it goes sometimes. So, gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. Fellas, as you know, we're already in week 4. My Cowboys got that win on Monday Night Football, just to put that out there to y'all, just so y'all know. Ron Fun hopefully is starting to change his mind about my Cowboys defense, but we're going to see. And, of course, the Tampa Bay Bucks, we talked about it last week, Ron Fun, that they might face a heck of a Rams team, and they did last week. We don't have long. We're getting right into it. Let's highlight a couple of the games that we talked about last week. We talked about the Kansas City Chiefs and the LA Chargers. We also talked Rams Buck game, and of course, we briefly discussed Broncos Jets game. And of course, that's because I was loving the value of Teddy Bridgewater, coupled with the way he has been playing in this new season this year. But anyway, Teddy Bridgewater, he did great. Loved him. Marvin Jones, Ron Fun, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was one of the guys that you wanted to start last week. He wound up having 5 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. And then also, Ron, you reminded the audience that they should not. There was a lot of buzz, but you said they should not start Justin Fields. And as a result, Justin Fields had only 6 completions for 68 yards, no touchdowns. But you did go to your main man, Russell Wilson from NC State. He had 23 completions, 254 yards, and a touchdown with absolutely no picks at all. So, Ron Fun, talk to us about how your weekend went.
Hey, man, last week was great. It was one of those weeks where it was tough, but if you follow sports and you follow the headlines, you could easily see how the game scripts were going to work out for us. And so with that being said, Rod, last week we said Justin Fields, stay away from him. I know he was a value play. I know he was expected to do really well, but he was going against the Browns, which have a great defense. They tallied 9 sacks against Justin Fields. I really hope he has a good, successful future, but last week was not the place for him. So if you really studied us and what we did last week, you would have saved you some dollars and earned you some points by avoiding Justin Fields. Additionally, you would have targeted Marvin Jones. You would have been, which was a highly owned play last week. So Marvin Jones does well. It helps you if he doesn't do that well. Doesn't hurt you that bad because he was highly owned in an offensive game where the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to be down, were going to be trailing most of the game, or at least throwing most of the game, and so that really helped. And then Russell Wilson is always a cooker. You just whether or not how much you're going to pay for him. He does well every week. Didn't do as well as I would want him to do last week, but if you had any of those plays, you were set up for success last week.
Oh, you definitely were. I don't know if you also had the stats of Teddy Bridgewater. I was up on Teddy Bridgewater, and you put out a little analysis about him last week, and we decided that we go with him. But one of the things that you just mentioned is you were letting the audience know about what happened last week. You're talking about Justin Fields. One of the things that the audience, we want to remind them, you cannot do not get emotional. Ron Fun, I know you're in the financial market. You love studying the stocks. And that's one thing also in the financial market. You cannot get emotional. Yes, you want a stock to do well. Yes, you want Justin Fields to do well, but not the time to be emotional. And a lot of people were emotional wanting Fields last week.
Oh man, you're right. Spot on with that analysis. And like I said last week about Teddy Bridgewater, I said, Rod, you don't really give picks. I said, but yo, I really like your Teddy Bridgewater pick. We might need to change sides one of these days if you keep on going with your picks like that.
Hey, we can do that, baby. We can do that. I need to, because I want to get up on you and B. Foster's level. And speaking of B. Foster, we know you were out on assignment last week. We appreciate you being back. It was like a void. We're missing one of the family members with you last week. So now we really ready to go that we got our third man back, or really the second man. I'm the third man because I'm just here trying to soak it all up from you guys. B. Foster, regardless of you being out on assignment last week, you know you always have your fantasy team ready. You always have them ready to go. Tell us how your weekend went last week.
Yeah, I had a great weekend as well. Despite playing Justin Fields, I was on Justin Fields last week, and of course he didn't do well. But hey, he was cheap and allowed me to get some other guys in. So I was on Austin Eckler, was a lock for me. Was no way I was not playing Austin Eckler against the Chiefs. They give up a lot of rushing yards, and Austin Eckler passes out the backfield, and we were looking at a really high scoring game. So Austin Eckler came through for me with 22.7 fantasy points. And then, of course, the hottest man in fantasy right now, Cooper Kupp. It's hard to get away from him. So let's not get cute. We're going to stay with him, man. Cooper Kupp last week against the Bucs. We knew another great game on the schedule. We knew Tom Brady was going to come out firing. Matt Stafford has looked great with Sean McVay. Cooper Kupp has become his main man. Cooper Kupp again drops 30.6 fantasy points. So at only 6,800, Cooper Kupp was another lock for me. So behind Kupp and Eckler, I was able to, even with Fields throwing a dud, I was able to have a winning week, man, behind those two studs.
Oh, well, that sounds great, man. So remind the audience of some of the keys also, guys, that you want to look for as far as whenever you're picking a game and whenever you're deciding which players to pick within that game. Just as a quick reminder, a quick recap to them. Would y'all do that for me, please? Ron Fun, you up. You mind reminding the audience of one of the things that they always want to pick when they're picking a game? What is it that they're looking for?
When you're trying to pick a game, you want to pick high-scoring games that are expected to be high-scoring totals, or you want to pick teams that have a high number of plays, offensive plays, because if they have a whole bunch of plays, then they have a chance to actually create points. Those would be the two things that I think people want to look for is Vegas totals and teams that have high plays or a high number of pace, and so that you have opportunities to get points. That's why I would start it.
Thank you, Ron Fun. B. Foster, would you like to add anything to that? Just to remind our audience, what are some of the things that they want to look for when they're deciding to pick a game, or even the players that they pick within that game?
Right. As Ron Fun said, you want to look for those high total games. And once you find those high total games, what we want to do is when we look at the guys that are getting the volume there. A lot of people are box score watchers. They want to see, well, who had the most touchdowns and who had the most yards. But what you really want to look at is opportunity. So we want to look at how many targets did he get? How many carries did he get? How many opportunities did these guys get? Because anybody can score a touchdown. A long touchdown on one play. You look at the box score, he had 60 yards and a touchdown, and he looks like he did well. But was that the only play he was on the field for? Is he a gadget guy? We want to look for those guys that are continuously getting the ball, getting opportunities, because the more they get it, the more chances they have to score fantasy points for. So I'm looking for within those high scoring games, I want the guys who are getting the most targets, the guys who are getting the most carries.
So even if guys are getting a lot of targets, but what if they have a record of possibly dropping quite a bit of balls, which of course is going to be bad for them because that means they're not going to be in the NFL very long. But, I looked at one of the targets at a wide receiver, can't call his name right now, but he had like 11 targets, but he had 4 catches. Do you still stay away from that guy, or do you still kind of veer toward him because of the targets?
This is a guy I'm looking to move towards. I know it's counterintuitive, but if you look at a guy like Marquise Brown last week, the guy was wide open on 3 plays, 3 touchdowns that he dropped. And targets are earned. Targets are not something that, are random acts here. The guy's targeted because he's good. the reason he has more drops than anybody is because he's getting more targets than anybody. The quarterback trusts him. The quarterback is going to him. You know, I mean, it's like guys in the NBA who shoot a lot of shots. Their field goal percentage is likely lower because they're shooting more shots. So a guy who's getting more targets, getting more opportunities, he's probably going to have a higher drop rate than other guys. But that's not shying me away. Drops, I don't worry at all about drops. Not a stat that I look at. Guys gets highlighted because they have a lot of drops. But the counter side to that is he's getting a lot of looks from his quarterback. So it's only a matter of time before that pays off for you.
That's awesome. B. Foster, Ron Fun, I want to thank you for those nuggets. Audience, I hope you are listening to these guys because they're dropping big-time nuggets. These are the type of nuggets that can make the difference between you guys winning and losing with your fantasy teams. So as you can see, these guys just had another great week 3 of fantasy football. And right here is where you want to be listening to what B. Foster and Ron Fun tell you. So we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, coming up, B. Foster, Ron Fun, they're going to be responding to some of the listeners who actually want to know what players they should sit or start this week. And that's going to be coming up in our start 'em or sit 'em segment. And the guys will then go into giving us a look on the inside of this upcoming week of fantasy football competition. And that's coming up right after these messages on Fantasy Football Come True, right here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. And welcome back, fantasy audience. I'm your host, Hot Rod Funderburk. I'm here with our fantasy big-time playmakers. You already know who they are, B. Foster and Ron Fun. And, of course, we hope that everyone has had a successful week 3 of fantasy football. And we know as long as you continue to stay tuned to us right here on Fantasy Football Come True, then you are going to have an excellent week of fantasy football in week 4. B. Foster, Ron Fun, both of you guys have the formula. The formula has not changed. You guys are staying true to what you believe, and you're continuing to work this system. So let's take a look at this upcoming week 4 of fantasy football in the NFL. Remember, guys who are listening, we like to find those players who are going to add value to your team. We're not necessarily looking for those players that everyone else is picking, because that's going to make you basically average and you're going to be right there with the rest of the field. But we need those guys that are going to make the difference on your fantasy teams. And we got some pretty good contests, some pretty good football games coming up this week. We had the Titans at the Jets, the Giants at the Saints. The Browns, of course, are visiting the Vikings. The Colts over at the Dolphins. The Chiefs are taking on the Eagles. The Seattle Seahawks are going to travel over to the Bay Area, San Francisco, for a divisional game. The Cardinals over at the Rams for another divisional game. My Cowboys are hosting the Carolina Panthers, hence why I'm saying that I hope the Carolina Panthers wind up 3-1. And the Ravens are going over to Denver to see my man Teddy B and the Broncos. B. Foster, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Which one of these matchups look good to you in week 4?
Oh, man, we got a lot of exciting matchups, man. I'm looking over here at this Minnesota-Cleveland game. You know, Ron Fun and his Cleveland Browns have been looking good. Their defense has been playing strong. But my former guy, you know, I'm a Washington football team fan. My former guy, Kirk Cousins, has just been on fire out here. You know, this guy, he's been known to kind of falter under the pressure and falter under big games. But like I say, early in the season, that's when you rock with Kirk Cousins. And he has shown that early in the season, these first 3 weeks, man, the guy's been on fire. Coming out against the Browns, again, a tough D-line. I think they're going to have to air the ball out. Dalvin Cook may be a little bit banged up, but I think he probably comes back this week. But Cousins with Jefferson and Thielen, I think the Browns are going to make them play. Odell came back last week. I like Odell this week again. So I really like that Cleveland Browns, Minnesota Vikings game.
Can I interrupt you since you mentioned that Cleveland and Minnesota game? A guy like Odell Beckham Jr. coming back, you know, off injury. Is he a guy you kind of sit to the side, wait to see what he does, or do you drop him right in the lineup if you're a fantasy guy?
Well, you know, last week we kind of didn't know how much he would handle. The coaching staff came out and says, you know, he doesn't have any really limitations from our medical staff, but we're just going to throw him out there and see how much he can handle. And he handled it all. He led the team in targets. They didn't have to do much last week because they handled the Browns handled the Bears pretty easily. But this week, I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So I think we're going to see the Odell Beckham that we're been used to seeing over the years. I think we see him this upcoming week. So I'm going to be on that bandwagon before the rest of the crowd does.
Okay, sounds good. Ron Fun, any games, matchups that you're seeing this upcoming week that you think you might can earn some fantasy points on?
Oh, for sure. There's plenty out there this week, but I'm gonna go to West Coast. I'm gonna stick with my man Russell Wilson. I'm gonna stick with that 49ers Kyle Shanahan game that we got coming up, and that game is projected to be a 50-point game. And as Brian will let you know, you need to think about the favorite team. 49ers are favored by 3.5, which they're not actually going to be up most of the game. They're going to be behind most of the game to the Seattle Seahawks. So what does that mean? The 49ers are going to have to pass the ball. The 49ers don't have a really good run game right now because they had a bunch of guys injured. George Kittle is actually showing up on the injury report this week. He may play, but that definitely impacts the game script, in my opinion. And so, Rod, I'm going to go on a limb like I usually do. I'd say about 75% of the time when we go on a limb, we right. But I'm going to throw out there Deebo Samuel this week, coming in at 6,500 DraftKings points. He's going to be that guy you want to get on your team this week. That game is going to be really attractive. It's a bounce back week. He struggled last week. Nobody's going to want to go there, but I think that game is going to be the game you want to be at.
Okay, so Ron Fun, everybody, listeners, he's talking about the Seattle versus the 49ers, and everybody knows that Ron Fun is a big Russell Wilson fan. He and Russell Wilson are alumni over there at NC State. So, of course, Ron Fun is loving that part. But Ron Fun, I do have to mess with you about one thing, my good man, and that one thing that I got to mess with you about is this right here. You told me every week it didn't matter. Cowboys the worst defense out here. So whoever is playing the Cowboys, you will own that particular offense. So Ron Fun, I didn't hear you mention the Cowboys versus the Panthers game. Is there a reason you have backed off of all this trash that you meet concerning the Cow defense, or you just happen not to mention that game and you're planning on getting some players off the Carolina Panthers this week? Is that what's going on?
Hey, man, you made me eat some word soup. Okay, I'm gonna just be honest with you. I got to eat a little bit of word soup. I thought the Dallas Cowboys were garbage, and after actually watching them, I realized that they're a decent team. I really do believe it. Now, Diggs is what makes y'all go. So, number one wide receivers versus Diggs, take him off your list for the week. I still think the Dallas Cowboys are kind of whack that you could play against them, but in a game of 50-50 or uncertainty, I'm going to take them off the page. I'm not going to mess with anybody on the Panthers this week. Also, the Panthers haven't really played anybody yet that would make me actually think that they're going to overpower the Dallas Cowboys offensively. So I'm not going to stream them just yet. And there's not any true leadership on the Panthers. So it's a little bit of mixture of Dallas stepping up, but also the Panthers being in this uncertainty space for me right now.
Okay. And guys, you gave us two great games, and I'm just going to throw a game out there. And I'd like for you to let me know if this game would be a good game for maybe a beginner fantasy person who's looking to figure out which game or which team maybe they should go after or attack. And I'm just going to throw the Titans, the Jets game out there. If I was a fantasy guy looking for a game like that, is there any name or names that will pop out to you for the Tennessee Titans versus the Jets that you may want to go after? Doesn't mean it's a good game, but just a game like that. And why would you mention the name? P. Foster, you want to take that one?
Sure. So this game is going to be interesting. Right now, Julio Jones hasn't practiced. My man Brown has not practiced. So their top two wide receivers are injured for the Titans. They play the Jets. We all know the Jets are pretty terrible. Haven't done much this year at all. With that said, if there was ever a game to feed the big dog, Derrick Henry, this is a feed the big dog Derrick Henry game. They have no wide receivers. Derrick Henry has even been catching balls out the backfield this year. The man has had 5 or 6 catches in every game this year. So that used to be the thing that hurt us with Derrick Henry. He wasn't going to catch any passes. But now the guy's catching passes. The Titans should dominate this game completely. I expect Derrick Henry to have a monster game against the New York Jets this week.
Good deal. Thank you, B. Foster. I appreciate that. I just wanted to throw one out there just for our beginner guys who are looking at games that they may want to target. And the only reason I said that game is because of the history that we've seen in this NFL season of the Jets defense, which has not been too good. So, guys, we're going to move over into our next segment. This is the Sit 'em or Start 'em segment. And, guys, we have some fantasy listeners who sent in some names. And, Ron Fun, I'm going to start with you. And it's actually very interesting because you actually mentioned one of the guys that we're being asked about on this particular fantasy shows, the Start 'em or Sit 'em segment. And this first player is a wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, Mr. Deebo Samuel.
Wow. You got to start that man. He's a monster on his own, but you got to start him. I know it's a bounce back week. People are a little nervous. Start him, put in your lineups, lock him in, and worry about something else. He's coming in at a cheap price. I project he's going to have 3x, maybe 4x his Fantasy King, Draft King point value. And to me, there's no reason to think about anybody else. Start him.
And would you say your point value, would you remind us that you mentioned last week, you want so many points per, is it 1,000 or 10,000 or per $1,000 that you pay for a player, right? You expect them to make so many points.
Per 1,000. So your budget is 50,000. So so essentially every game, I'm trying to earn 150 points per game. If I can earn 150 points per game, I am projecting that I will be ahead of the cash line. If I earn 140, I might be below the cash line. So again, it's 50,000 points. So 50,000 divided by 1,000 is 50. Multiply that by 3, and you end up with 150 points. So that's for the total. And if you can kind of apply that same rule to an individual player, so someone who's coming in at 6,500 points, it's like 6.5 times 3. I need to project them to get somewhere between 18 to 21 points. And if they can do that for me, they pay off. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Sounds great. Thank you. It does. Thank you for that nugget for the audience, Ron Fun. Appreciate that. B. Foster, I'm going to switch over to you to our Start 'em or Sit 'em segment. Mr. DJ Moore, wide receiver, going against my Cowboy defense this week. This is Rodney. Looks like Coleman came in with this question. Do you start or do you sit DJ Moore, wide receiver, Panthers?
Yeah, as Ron Fun alluded to, man, this kid Diggs, man, is a problem over there. The number one corner has been shadowing wide receivers. He shut down Mike Evans in week 1. It looks like he's going to be lined up across from DJ Moore this week. So I'm going to stay away from DJ Moore. DJ Moore 6,600. This Cowboys defense can be had, but not at that number one receiver spot. You got Robbie Anderson on the other side, hasn't done much this year. Chris McCaffrey is going to be out. We got the squeaky wheel going with Robbie Anderson saying they want to get him more involved. So I'm going to drop down a little bit to Robbie Anderson, only 5,100 on the other side, who's facing the lesser resistance of that Cowboys defense. So I'm sitting DJ Moore, but you can slide right over to Robbie Anderson and get him in your lineup.
All right, guys, y'all heard it from B. Foster. Definitely sit DJ Moore, but if you got to have somebody going against that Panthers defense, you better slide on over there to Robbie Anderson. You heard it first right here on Fantasy Football Come True. Ron Fun, I'm going to slide back over to you. We have another emailer who said, Ron Fun, would you sit or start Mr. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, Atlanta Falcons?
Oh, man, that's another great one to ask a question about, but I'd be starting Calvin Ridley this coming week. Calvin Ridley hasn't done that well relative to expectations this far in the season, but he's going against the Washington football team. They're known for their ferocious defense, but their ferocious defense has been more like a chihuahua this season. and so with that being said, I am going to play Calvin Ridley this week. Atlanta really likes to attack you in the air, and it seems like the Washington football team is allowing everybody to go against them in the air. You saw what Josh Allen did to them last week. It was kind of crazy. It was kind of insane. And I actually believe that the Atlanta Falcons have the potential to do something very, very similar. Calvin Ridley It's 7,000. I know it's a lot of points for somebody who hasn't proven it just yet, but I think he has a favorable matchup. He's their number one dog this week, and I'm going to go with starting Calvin Ridley. I know it's very controversial, but that's what we like to do on this show. We don't want to go for the easy names. We want to give you names that are deep, deep, deep in the list that you listen to and can help you out. Calvin Ridley starting.
That's it right there. Ron Fun, he's starting Calvin Ridley. B. Foster, back to you for the last emailer fantasy fan of the day, Mr. DeAndre Smith, running back, Detroit Lions. Do you start or sit DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, I got to get DeAndre in my lineup, man. The guy's, he's 6,200. He's had a great season thus far. The Lions are getting smashed by everybody. And DeAndre Swift is catching all the check down passes that he can handle. He's had 24 fantasy points, little down in second week against Green Bay with only 12. Came back last week against Baltimore with 24 more fantasy points. Head coach came out and said, hey, we got to get this kid the ball more. He was a little banged up to start the season, but he's healthy now. They're going to look to get him the ball more. Playing Chicago. I love DeAndre Swift this week. 6,200. He's just too cheap.
Audience, you heard it. DeAndre Swift, you start him this week. And audience, that's going to do it. You've heard B. Foster. You heard Ron Fun. They gave you their fantasy players this week to sit and start. They gave you some good games that you can get on to hurry up and start putting some green in your jeans. So you've heard it here. If you miss it, then it's totally on you guys because we gave you what we had to give you. Fantasy Ballers, we reached the end of our show. But if you ever need to reach out to either B. Foster or Ron Fun, they're going to let you know how they're only fingertips away from you. B. Foster, if the folks need you, how can they get you?
Yes, sir. You can always find me on Twitter. That's at Foster_BSE. Again, at Foster_BSE on Twitter.
No doubt. And Ron Fun, if the audience needs you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me on my social media opportunities, which will be Instagram and what else I got? Instagram and Twitter. They can catch me on those with the handle at Ron Fun. And also, we've been working on the beginnings of a free information site. So we've been working on the ComeTrueNetwork.com. It's really in its beginning phases, but what's out there right now, some of our picks, we're going to keep trying to put them out there on a weekly basis. So you can also catch us at the ComeTrueNetwork.com. You will be able to see our picks. They're going to be rudimentary looking, but they're going to be very value added in execution.
No doubt. Well, on behalf of B. Foster and Ron Fun, I'm your host, Hot Rod Funderburk. Make sure you tune in next week to another edition of Fantasy Football Come True. Remember, this is the only show that wants to see you put some money in your pocket.